morning. Welcome back to The Marketing Thread. I am your host, Todd Schnick, joined by my friend and colleague, Courtney Stewart. Good morning, Courtney. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. We're going to talk about thinking about putting together a plan for the oncoming year. I can't believe we're already having to do that. But as we record this particular episode in September, it is already time to start planning and thinking about the following upcoming year. So going to be a really, really important conversation. I've looked at your deck. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't even think about. So this is going to be a great refresher course for those watching to remember everything they got to prepare for the coming year. Before we do that, however, remind everyone what the Marketing Thread is all about.
Okay, yeah, the Marketing Thread. This is our series of short videos. And the goal of these videos is to provide you with ideas that can easily be added into your marketing plan to increase your effectiveness. So this collection of videos addresses subjects such as social media best practices, generational-based marketing, media relations, blogging, and of course, planning for next year, just among other helpful marketing tips that are all designed to promote successful marketing strategies.
It's been a really fun series to be part of. I know I say this at the beginning of every one of these videos, but I continue to learn things. I've been working with you guys for so long now. I feel like I know a lot of this stuff, but I've learned something with each and every one of these videos. So it's been a great series. So kick us off. So we're going to talk about planning for next year.
Yes, absolutely. We're talking about money. Or actually, better yet, a more favorable topic, how to spend money. I prefer how to spend money versus talking about just numbers. Yep. So September and October, like you mentioned, it's traditionally when companies start budgeting for the following year. And you're right. I cannot believe it's already here. It's my birthday month. It's fall is just right around the corner. So, this is my favorite time of the year. And budgeting is planning for next year is part of that too, because I do love to talk about strategic marketing, big picture items. So we're in full 2022 planning mode for ourselves and many of our clients right now. So that's kind of what inspired us to have this conversation today. So in the new home industry, the new home building industry, which is primarily the industry that we work in, that most of our clients are in, it's typical for about 1 to 1.5% of your overall projected sales volume to be reserved for your marketing efforts. So once you know what your projected sales volume is for the year, you can take that percentage and figure out that number that you have to spend on your marketing. That's really the number you're aiming to hit when you create your budget. And, the basics of what needs to be included in your marketing budget, they really haven't changed in a long time. We'll go over those first, the core elements that make up your marketing budget. And then after we review the basics, we are going to talk about some of the things that have changed, especially over the last, 18 months or so. And we're going to cover really what you must have in your budget for 2022, what you must be thinking about kind of outside of what our normal marketing elements are.
There are still people I find that are like, budgeting's fine to kind of give me a very loose framework of what I ought to be thinking about. But I disagree. I think you need to be very, very thoughtful about putting your budget together. I always look at your budget as similar to like a GPS, right? So you put in your destination where you want to go, and then inevitably on that journey, you go off path. And then your GPS recalculates for you. Well, that's kind of what a budget can enable you to do, right? So business has always got throwing curveballs at you, and having the ability to kind of know how you were originally going to get to where you wanted to go makes it easier to make those mid-course corrections when things happen. So it's one of those deals that makes it easier to make quick strategic adjustments when you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more in depth you are with your budget, it allows you to, look at the big picture and then also look at, itemize line by line, element by element. So when things do change, you have the ability to kind of course correct really quickly and get back on track when you see, kind of where you're over, where you're under it. And it allows you to make adjustments on and prioritize. What to do when you have to make those changes.
That's critical. If somehow your budget's going to fall short, you need to be able to make a smart decision on prioritizing. and making the decision on if I can only spend money on one or two things, what's the more important thing? Budgeting and thinking through that process makes that decision a lot easier.
Absolutely. And we're going to get pretty detailed in each little piece when we go through this presentation today. So to really get you thinking through all of the different elements, because there's so much that goes into a marketing budget. All right. So the very first thing we're going to talk about in your budget is your online presence. So when we are looking at your overall marketing efforts, your online presence, your branding, and those things combined with your content are going to form the foundation of your marketing program. So those three elements are must-haves. You cannot ignore those three things. Even if you do nothing else, if that's the only thing you spend money on all year, those are the three most important things. And so for the purpose of this presentation, we're assuming that branding, your company branding is already in place and that that's not something that you're having to do. And that it already exists. So we're not spending money on that. It's not really included in this presentation. But for new companies, or if you're developing a new master plan community that needs its own branding, those types of things, obviously branding would be incorporated and be a big part of your budget. But for most companies, your branding exists. You're not making any changes to it, so we're not really going to talk about it today. But that's the piece of the puzzle, number one. And then number two is your online presence. So that's your website. Having a good website, even if it already exists and you don't have to spend money on building it or creating it or making major changes, it still needs regular updates to remain relevant. It requires somebody, monitoring and managing the back end, making changes to the content when necessary. So it is an ongoing expense, even if it is, just a minor expense to pay someone to monitor it on an ongoing basis. And then as part of that, you also have your SEO or your search engine optimization. That's a big part of your online presence. It affects your website, obviously, and several other elements too outside of your website, things that a professional SEO expert can do to grow your online presence. So that's one of those things too. SEO requires an ongoing, regular basis check-in and work on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on your budget. So incorporating those two things in there, having wiggle room to spend the money to update them on an ongoing basis is absolutely necessary. And then, of course, big picture items, if you're looking at updating or even rebuilding your website, that's going to take a much bigger chunk of your budget than just an ongoing maintenance program.
I look at your maintaining your online presence similar to maintaining your front yard. You got to keep it mowed. You got to keep it weeded. You got to keep it fertilized. You got to do regular upkeep and maintenance of it to keep it looking good. Same thing applies to your online presence, And so in SEO, gosh, we've been talking about SEO for so long now. I think some people think, it's kind of embedded. I don't really have to think about it. I've just recently started to refocus on that with my own online presence, and it's made a dramatic impact. You can't ever forget any of these things. You got to maintain it all the time.
Right, exactly. Because like with your analogy with yard work, if you miss a few weeks of yard work, it's triple the amount of work when you come back and start doing it again. And it's the same with any of this. That ongoing maintenance is crucial to keep everything in tip-top shape and keep it functioning the way we want to.
Yep.
All right. And then the next part, that third piece of the puzzle for the basis of your foundation is your content marketing. So when we look at content marketing, we're including pretty much any written marketing that you're doing. This is a kind of a simple way to think about it. So your blog, that's number one. That's the top piece of your content marketing program. If you don't have a blog on your website, put that in your budget for 2022 and build it out and get it updated on a regular basis. It is so important for a variety of reasons, not only informing your consumer and providing them with information, which obviously is a key piece of the puzzle. It provides you with content to put on your social media sites. And it's a huge part of your SEO program for your website, keeping your website updated with new content, telling the search engines to crawl your site, to rank your content, and allowing you to show up in search results for those keyword terms that you want to rank for. So having a blog is absolutely necessary. And if you don't have one already, it needs to be in your budget. If you're not updating it on a regular basis, put a plan in place to have someone writing that content and putting it on your website and on an ongoing basis in 2022. And then we would also consider your social media content part of your content marketing, all of the messaging that you're putting out there on any of your social sites, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Pinterest, TikTok, whatever you have, that counts as part of your content marketing program. And then email marketing is the third piece. So this can range from your ongoing autoresponder programs, if you have follow-up or pre-programmed generic type emails that go out for informational purposes to new potential buyers or leads that you get. That's going to be part of your email marketing program, as well as the follow-up that your sales team is doing. And then the fourth piece of the content marketing bucket is going to be the public relations efforts that you're doing. So that's kind of our foundation. Our company was started as a public relations firm. So we strongly believe in having a PR program in place to get your news out there, sharing your company news, your community news with your local media. And it's also a great way to connect with reporters who are working on industry stories. Obviously, real estate related topics are in the media constantly right now, whether it was the lumber conversation or how much the housing market has gone kind of haywire over the last year. There are plenty of opportunities to be included kind of as an expert source and be quoted in these news articles. And that's something we've been working closely with our clients on this year because it helps from a perspective of getting your name out there, of course, and that name and brand recognition, but also helps you to be viewed as an expert when you're quoted in these stories in some of these, reputable news sources. So a public relations effort, our program is still an important part of your content marketing program. And we firmly believe that it's not going anywhere and that it's the fourth, piece of the puzzle that kind of completes your content marketing bucket.
Yeah. And to those listening, please note other episodes in the Marketing Thread series go deeper on a lot of those topics, such as blogging and so on and so forth. So you can check those out to get more details there.
Yeah, we definitely have talked about those because I would say the content marketing forms the basis kind of our core services. So we have lots and lots of information on those topics if it's something you're interested in learning more about. So now we're going to dive into the secondary components. We've talked about the basis of your foundation that has to be included no matter what. And now as we go through these next several slides, these are the things that you can kind of pick and choose where you're spending your money based on what works in your market, in your budget, and with your goals that you have. So advertising is the next really big thing to look at. And then we have it broken down into two types. We've got our digital advertising and our print advertising. So digital is going to include your pay-per-click ads, your social media advertising. Pretty much every social site now just about has opportunities for paid advertising and absolutely should be used. If nothing else, at least get a Facebook and Instagram advertising budget in place, but there are plenty of other opportunities outside of those. OTT ads, which are over-the-top ads. If you're not familiar with those are the ads that are going to run on all these streaming services. So Hulu, YouTube TV, all of those streaming services give you the opportunity to do OTT ads, which historically have been less expensive than traditional TV commercials. That's not going to always be the case because that has become so much more popular, but it's still a great opportunity to kind of get into that advertising space. And then, of course, we have traditional radio advertising, which is still a viable option in a lot of markets. We still see clients doing that, especially on some of your more local radio stations. And then last but not least, you've got all of your online publications. So, of course, all of your news outlets have their online sites now and have opportunities for advertising on there. Any kind of online publications, local or regional in your area, are great opportunities to get some digital advertising out there. And then looking at print, these are your more traditional forms of advertising. So your print newspapers, print magazines, your local community publications that you may have. Those typically all offer print advertising opportunities. And even in your local publications and in the newspapers and magazines, a lot of times you have opportunities to do paid editorial content, or which we call advertorials. So those are all great options. And then we also include direct mail, which are like your postcard type mailers, as well as billboards in the print advertising bucket. So those are all different types of advertising routes you can go. And different markets are going to support different advertising opportunities better. So looking at all of your different options, getting prices for all of them and figuring out, what fits best within your budget. It's time to start doing that if you haven't already for next year and getting all of that together.
Quick comment on digital advertising. You guys can prove that when done effectively and correctly, online advertising really works, really is impactful. And this is just an appeal to those listening. I hate to say this. There's a hint of cynicism here, but social media particularly it's very much a pay to play community now, but it does work when you invest. And so don't go cheap on this budget because and there's episodes again in this marketing thread series about your online advertising. When done right, it really does work. It can be a big benefit to your organization. So be bold on putting the amount of dollars that you need to do on this on your budget, because it is. I still think too many people go cheap there, and it costs them.
Absolutely, and that kind of is a good segue into something that not really planning on talking about in this presentation, but just as a side note. A lot of people have done away with all these portions of their budget over the last year or so because it hasn't seemed necessary. The inventory hasn't been there to support robust advertising efforts. But, we're seeing a slowdown. Things are starting to kind of move in the opposite direction in terms of, just not needing to do all of these things. So I highly, highly recommend you get back to your traditional marketing budget in terms of spending the money in these avenues like we did pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. I think it's really, really important. Don't skimp on these things because things are not going to continue as they have been, as they were in 2020. We know that. We're seeing that already. And so I think if you're not doing these things, if you haven't picked your advertising back up, if you haven't been spending on the marketing side over the last 12 or so months, it's time to plan to start that again in January. So it's really, really important. I think that you really look at all these numbers and get back to our traditional breakdown and spend that we've been used to doing. All right. So after we talk about advertising, we're going to talk about more digital assets, but these are different. These are your assets. And they are things like your renderings, your floor plan renderings, or new, streetscape renderings, amenity renderings for anything new that you have coming on board. Making sure you have the expense to have those created in your budget. Your site maps, your virtual and 3D tours of any of your floor plans. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those later, but having budget for that in this digital asset bucket is important. And for things like your site plan, those are probably going to need to be updated on an ongoing basis. So making sure that you have the budget allocated for that in there for someone to take the time to update those and re-add them back to the website is important. And then photography and video. If you have any new communities coming online, any new floor plans being created, all of those things will need photography. All of those things will probably need some sort of videography to accompany them. If you don't have plans for anything new like that coming on board, take stock of what already exists. Is it time to update some of that photography, to bring it more current? Have you redecorated any of your models that need to be rephotographed? So think through all of those different pieces and figure out where you can make changes for the better or where you're going to need to spend money to upgrade or update. Because especially after the last 18 months, all of your digital assets, what you have online are so, so important. Because people are relying on that when they start their new home search to inform them of what's out there, what's available, especially as we go through these periods of people either not being able to be on site and see things in person or not feeling comfortable with being on site. So having your digital assets up to par is more important than it has ever been before.
Yeah, no, you took the words right out of my mouth. The pandemic has permanently changed how people are going to shop for houses. And these digital assets are now essential. And so you have got to invest and be sure those are strong, effective tools. Yep,
absolutely right. And like I said, we're going to talk more about that a little bit at the end when we talk about the things that are absolutely necessary for 2022. So you have other assets as well. your collateral. So you have these printed assets, you have branded items that all need to be incorporated in your budget. And you're going to have, for a lot of these, not only your cost of creating them or updating them, but you're also going to have your printing cost as well. So make sure you incorporate that into your budget. For a lot of these printed assets, these are going to be the things that are, your on-site sales team is going to be using and handing out when people come in the door. So your printed floor plans, your community brochures, flyers, price sheets, lender info or warranty information, your included features, your amenity list, your site plans, your letterhead, your business cards. I mean, the list goes on. Any printed material that you're using in your model homes or when you do any kind of events or anything needs to be included in this budget. And again, if you don't have a printer that prints really nicely in each of your sales centers, and you're having to have things printed, you're going to need to include that portion of it in your budget as well. And then also your branded items. We call them our tchotchkes, your hats, your cups, keychains, shirts, anything like that you get branded that you're giving away when you sponsor stuff or that you're giving to people when they come on site to kind of spread your brand exactly right. Those items need to be accounted for, making sure you have enough on site, you've got them created, shipped and all of that. So all of these pieces these physical assets that you have to promote your community and your company would kind of go under this big collateral bucket. And be prepared to pay extra shipping costs this year. Whatever you've been including as that portion of your budget, if you have in the past, mark it up because we all know that those prices have just continued to increase.
Yeah, you have to account for inflation, and you've got to account for inflation, and you've also got to the supply chain's messed up, so it's just going to take some time. So you got to factor that in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We actually have already ordered our holiday gifts that we give out because we knew that things are going to be a mess this holiday season with supply chain and shipping issues. So that's absolutely something to factor in. All right. Next, we're going to get to the items that maybe seem a little more ambiguous to think about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Realtor Outreach. And this kind of ranges for every builder that we work with. Everybody kind of has their own version of Realtor Outreach. And this is another one of those things that probably really has been overlooked the past year or so. It hasn't been a necessary thing that builders are having to do, but we highly recommend, reconsidering it and adding it back into your budget for next year. Because, regardless of how the market is, realtor relations are so important. So thinking through, any special realtor events that you're going to have, open houses or VIP events specific to realtors. Can you host or sponsor CE courses for them? Do realtor gifts or provide meals for their sales meetings? Any of these things like this that you would be doing for realtors are going to be included in this portion of your budget, as well as any realtor promotions or reward programs that you may be doing. So if that's something you offer or would consider offering in the future, that's going to go in your budget section for Realtor Outreach.
Courtney, as you know, we have been doing the podcast for over 10 years now. And when we interview builders, most of them are doing some sort of Realtor Outreach or they have some realtor promotions. And so you've got to invest in this, and you got to stand out. You got to make this thing really worth their while. It's a very effective way to deepen those relationships, which are critical, I think, to the long-term sales success of what you're doing. So this is not something to overlook.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed it when you said long-term. We got to stop looking beyond this, market that has happened in the last 10 years. Look at the future, long-term. I think getting back on track with those realtor relations, if they haven't been there for the last year, is going to be a really important portion of marketing this year. All right. And then next we have our listing services. So outside of your traditional FMLS or MLS or Georgia MLS, you've got a lot of other options for listing. Zillow, New Homes Directory, BDX. There's so many different listing services out there. So look at which ones are the most effective in your market, get the most traffic, and get the pricing to have your communities put on there. Because I think that those are, something that we really can't overlook, especially Zillow when you're reaching out to consumers who are early on in their search. Those are some of the these are some of the big name listing services outside of the realtor specific ones that you should be considering.
This is again where I think the pandemic has made these investments even more critical than usual. So it's important.
Absolutely. All right. And then talking about a couple of physical aspects, your signage. This is an important part of your marketing budget too, and something that's really easily overlooked. But are you building any new communities this year or in 2022? If you're planning on it, you're going to need an entrance monument, some sort of sign. Those are expensive. They can range from the really simple to the really elaborate. So think through what those are going to be like and include them in your signage budget. All of your directionals, whether they're permanent or temporary within a community or in the surrounding area, are going to be included in your signage budget. Your parking signs at your sales centers, your amenity signage, any kind of signage that you're going to need to create or update throughout 2022 needs to be included here in your budget. And then as a continuation on those physical things, we're going to talk about your sales center. This is a more expensive portion of your marketing budget. If you're not planning on opening any new model homes or sales centers, then really you just need to look at, are there any updates or ongoing maintenance pieces that need to be done to the sales center? Collateral that needs to be updated, technology maintained, those sorts of things that would go into this portion of your budget. If you're going to have new sales centers, you've got a much bigger thing to look at with the cost of making those, creating those sales centers. And then another thing that you could look at, there's been kind of an argument that you can replace your sales center and model home with a virtual version. That's something that we have seen more and more builders start talking about, which of course is a conversation that has come on because of the pandemic. But that's a huge, huge chunk of change in your budget that you could be saving by replacing those. So just a little something to think about. We've seen this in the condo industry for a really long time being done. So it may be kind of the wave of the future. So something to think about, if you traditionally do 3 or 4 models in a community plus a sales center, maybe you can cut back or save funds there with some kind of non-traditional things that you can do. And then we're almost done talking about the main pieces of your marketing budget. So next we have events. These really are going to range from new community grand openings to open houses, tours of inventory homes that you're trying to get sold, muddy boots tours or lot reservation tours, community events. We see those a lot with our bigger master plan communities hosting like fall festivals and things like that that are designed to get traffic on site, but be a little bit outside of the normal like salesy types events. So think through the different opportunities you're going to have for events over the next year and make a budget for those. And some of these things are going to be, obviously subjective on timing and all of that, but in making sure that you have that money set aside so that if you do want to have these events, it's there in your budget is really crucial.
This is probably where you could have skimped a little bit in 2020 and this year, but I think you need to be prepared for full throttle events in 2022.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Fingers crossed, prayers, all the things that we're going to be able to have all the normal events in 2022. And like we talked about at the beginning, worst case scenario, if we get to a point where we're not able to do that, you've got this portion of your budget that you can reallocate towards, digital events and webinars and things like that. Because again, you've got to be able to be flexible, but having all these things spelled out very early on in your budget will allow you to shift and adjust as things happen.
Yep.
All right. And the very last thing to talk about here in this section is your marketing team. So who is going to be responsible for your marketing efforts? And this can be a combination of a variety of things. It can be an internal team. You may have your full marketing, public relations, advertising, all of those efforts rolled into one department or multiple departments within your company. And so that's all your own staff. Or you may be smaller and not have anyone on staff that really handles this on a day-to-day basis. So you may be looking for an agency similar to what we do, or a variety of agencies that handle different aspects of this plan. And so that's going to have, all of the associated fees and things that go along with that need to be incorporated into your marketing budget. Or which is probably what we see the most often. It's going to be a combination of those things. You're going to have some on-site employees that are, part of your team that are going to handle some of these things. And then you're going to outsource somebody, for instance, to do your blogging and your social media marketing or your advertising. So look at that and figure out what kind of agency fees are you going to be paying, and then what percentage of salaries for that marketing or advertising staff should be included in your marketing budget.
Well, and whether you are hiring on-site staff or engaging an agency such as yours, you get what you pay for. So invest boldly here, and it will pay significant dividends if you invest well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not a portion of the budget to shy away from or skimp on, like you said. You want to make sure that you have the strongest team in place to handle all of these things, or else all that money that you're spending on everything else is not going to be as effective if you don't have the right people in place to spend that money for you. All right. And now we are on to our very last slide, really the part to me that's more fun because it is unique and different. And this is kind of where I want to talk about thinking outside of your traditional marketing box a little bit. So as we've alluded to and mentioned, several times already, our entire industry, our entire world has shifted over the last 18 months. And really in our industry, things are never going to go back to how they were before. Things have changed. Consumers are already moving towards, wanting everything online. We know consumers want things immediately, the Amazon culture, everything needs to be available at our fingertips right now. And these younger generations, my generation and the several after me that are moving into the housing market, they don't want to have to come on site or have to call somebody or have to reach out to get the information. They want it available to them on their own time when they're ready for it, without that, human interaction to at least to start with. So if you haven't caught up or, changed with the times, you really have to do it now. 2022, putting it in your budget for next year is the time to do it, or you're going to be left behind, honestly. You're going to get left out of the conversation, especially, as I said, as these younger generations come through. So I have several things listed here to think about. We talked about our website. Does the website need an update or an overhaul? If it is not very, very user-friendly, if it's not simple and easy to use on every type of device, you really need to consider updating or upgrading.
Yeah. Is it mobile friendly? It's amazing how many sites still aren't mobile friendly.
I had that note in here and then I was like, surely I don't have to say that. Like, we have to be mobile friendly by now, but you're right. I've been on websites this week in our industry, and they don't have a mobile friendly website. And there's things on their page that are 100% broken. They just don't work. And it's their listing pages with all of the homes that they should have listed. It's a realtor site, and that is their bread and butter. That's their business, and it's broken. It doesn't work on their website, and you absolutely can't access it on your phone. So you're right. There are still people out there that we need to give that reminder to. You've got to be able to be easily viewed and accessible from everywhere. And then going one step further, like I said, people want their information. They want it now on their own time without having to have human interaction to get the details they need especially when they're in the early stages of their research, before they're ready to make that jump and that commitment of reaching out to you and having a conversation with, your on-site sales agent, or filling out a lead form where they know that you're going to start calling them and emailing them. People are in the market for a long time doing all their own research before they ever get to that point. So on your website and your community pages in particular, is every bit of information there that your potential buyers are going to need. I know that kind of goes against traditional thinking of, we don't want to put it all out there because we want to force them to come to us and contact us so we capture their information. But in this new generation, in this new age, people are going to take you out of the consideration process if they have other options, if they can't get the information they need without coming to you. So do you have full community details available? Are your standard features, your amenities, are there directions? Have you highlighted the local attractions or the local neighborhood? Are all of your available floor plans with 3D tours or virtual tours available on your website? You really need to have someone outside of your organization look at your website, audit it, and tell you what would they want to know that's missing, and then get that information on your website if it's not already there. I think this is a very, very crucial and important thing to do as you head into 2020, is to really look at your website with an outsider's eye and think about what else you can provide your potential buyers. And then moving on from that, there's a lot of other cool things that you can do. We've seen clients create kind of like online magazines that really give your community a cool lifestyle, modern, kind of hip vibe that focus on, the homes. There's, they might have featured articles in there that people have written, like what you would put in your blog, but it's digestible like a magazine, with all of these different, like The Issue and those different publications where you can put a digital magazine. That's a really cool thing to do that has really resonated, I think, with the younger generations. 3D tours, virtual tours, Matterports. We've talked about that. If you do not have one of those for every single floor plan that you have available, you need to do it in 2022. Your buyers want to virtually walk through your homes and your floor plans, especially because it's not feasible to have models of every single floor plan for most builders. But that's what buyers want. They want to be able to visualize and envision those homes. And when they finally do come on site and tour your model, they want to feel like they've already been there, that it's not brand new. So make sure that you have those tours in place. Online sales programs. That's another big thing. We work with several online sales trainers and counselors that will help you set these programs up, and you can talk to them and figure out if it is a fit. If you build enough homes, if you're getting enough web traffic, I think it's really important to have one of those because, again, going back to the generation that wants everything at their fingertips now, that it's not just a generation anymore. It's everybody. Everybody wants their information now, and having an online sales counselor that can be available, 8 to 10 hours a day or whatever it may be, to answer questions, immediately or even schedule appointments is so, so important. You can schedule your doctor's appointments online now. I mean, literally anything you can click and schedule your appointments online. So that's something that you should consider if you don't have an online sales program in place to allow people to get that information very, very quickly. And also it has been proven, just to increase the number of leads and appointments and eventually sales that you're getting when you have that program in place. Email marketing program, we talked about that a little bit. If you don't have one set up, really look into that and consider it for 2022. It's really important to just kind of
still works. It still works.
It does. And in keeping you top of mind and in front of people, it's just another avenue and another route to keep yourself in the consideration process, because buyers are in the consideration process for a really, really long time. So it takes a lot of effort to get them, from your Facebook page into your sales centers and into, to the process of buying, to the point of buying.
And there's a lot of competing distractions out there, so email can also remind people, oh yeah, I need to be thinking about that. So
absolutely.
Don't think email's passe.
Exactly. I know we all get a lot of emails, but I mean, it so often reminds me of things like you said that I need to do or things that I want to look at. And it's just, it still works. So if you don't have an email marketing program in place, that's something to talk to someone about or consider for 2022. And then the last thing, which is really kind of outside the box for a lot of builders, but have you thought about giving your buyers the ability to buy online? Because that's coming. That technology exists. It's here. It's in the process of being built into websites. And before long, you are going to be able to do just like you do with cars. Pick out your floor plan, put all your options in there, all your features, make your customizations or personalizations, and do it all online. Save it and turn it into a house. It's coming. It is going to be something that is 100% a reality here very soon. And so start thinking about it.
Well, then the actual buying process. I mean, we're doing virtual closings now. I mean, so this world is evolving. This is, again, where the pandemic has lurched this forward. But there's a right way to do it and an efficient way to do it and a pleasant way to do it. So you need to be thinking about that. That's a critical step here. I mean, there are people that have bought a home that they've never even stepped in.
Oh, absolutely.
So you have to accept that reality, and there's a way to do it where it's a really fun, quick, efficient process, and you're gonna win a lot if you invest well there. Absolutely,
you're right. The pandemic. I mean, these technologies and things were coming. Our consumer preferences were shifting this way already, but bluntly, the building industry is not exactly cutting edge. Usually when it comes to the technology on the sales side, we're just not. And the pandemic has absolutely pushed us forward a long ways and forced us to do a lot of things that we should have already been doing and working towards. But we were able to be complacent because the market was so good and things were functioning well like they were. But the future is here, however you want to say it, it's time. If these strategies or items aren't already part of your marketing mix or part of your marketing program or even on your radar, you really need to start looking into them and figuring out what makes sense to include into your 2022 budget and what will work for you, because things have changed and we've got to change with them. All right. Well, that wraps up my conversation about planning for next year. So if you haven't started your budgeting for 2022, it's time. Of course, that's something that we can help with. If you're looking for assistance, if you need someone to help, kind of take a big picture look at your marketing strategy and figure out what to implement, what will work for you. That's something that we are happy to help with. And we would love to have a conversation with anybody who is ready to start their 2022 planning process.
Outstanding. Well, Courtney, thank you for all this great information. This is a process that you can't start this too soon. So get on it. You got some great things to think about, a good framework with which to operate now. So, all right. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. On behalf of my co-host, Courtney Stewart, I am Todd Schnick. We'll see you next time on The Marketing Thread.